They say family is supposed to have your back. But what happens when the knives come from your own blood? For 62 years, I poured my life into my family. Quietly, steadily, and with more love than most could ever know. It took just one careless comment from my daughter's husband to snap the thread I'd been holding together for decades. But I didn't fall apart. I listened. I watched. I decided it was finally time to show them all who I really am. My name is Helen Carter, and this is the story of how I reclaimed my dignity. If you're watching this, tell me where you're tuning in from in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine. Now, let me take you on the journey of how I turned the tables on those who called me Deadweight. Mom, can you watch Sarah tonight? Mark and I have that work dinner. Emily's voice carried that familiar tone, half asking, half expecting. She didn't even look up from her phone as she spoke. I was folding laundry in the living room, same as I'd done every Tuesday for the past 30 years. Of course, sweetheart. What time do you need me? 6 would be perfect. Oh, and could you maybe tidy up a bit? Mark's boss might drop by later. Mark walked in then, adjusting his tie with that self-important air he'd perfected since getting his promotion. Helen, make sure Sarah's in bed by 8. She was up too late last time. She was reading, I said quietly. I thought that was... Reading can wait. Structure is more important. Emily finally looked up. Mom, you know how Mark feels about routines. I nodded, though something twisted in my chest. Sarah was 7 and loved our bedtime stories. But I'd learned not to argue about the small things. Save your battles, I told myself. Where's your father? Emily asked, scanning the room. Garage workshop. He's been working on some project all week. Of course he is. She sighed. Mom, did you transfer the money for Sarah's dance lessons? I forgot to mention it yesterday. Already done. $500 for the month, plus costume fees. Mark glanced over. You're keeping track of that, right? We don't want to overspend on extras. I almost laughed. If only he knew about the extras I covered. The mortgage payment when his commission was short, the car repairs Emily couldn't afford, the emergency fund I'd built for Jacob's art supplies. But that wasn't their business. Family takes care of family, even when family doesn't notice. Jacob called earlier, I said instead. His gallery showing is next month. Still playing artist? Mark shook his head. He should get a real job. Art is a real job, I said, though my voice was soft. When it pays the bills, maybe. Mark's laugh was harsh. Until then, it's just expensive hobbies. Emily shifted uncomfortably. Mark, Jacob's talented. Talented doesn't pay rent, Em. Your mother keeps bailing him out. Heat rose in my cheeks, but I kept folding. They didn't know about the small business loan I'd co-signed for Jacob's studio, or the months I'd quietly covered his utilities. They didn't know about a lot of things. Speaking of rent, Emily said, we might need help with the deposit for the new place. The landlord wants first and last month up front. How much? I asked. 4,000. I know it's a lot, but I'll transfer it tomorrow. Mark's eyebrows shot up. Just like that? Family is family, I said, though the words felt heavy. Later that evening, Sarah curled up beside me on the couch. Grandma, why do you always help everyone? Because that's what you do when you love someone. But who helps you? The question caught me off guard. Sarah's innocent eyes were so serious, so concerned. When had a 7-year-old become the only person to ask about my needs? I help myself, sweetheart. That sounds lonely. Richard emerged from the garage around 9, oil-stained and distracted. "Helen, did you eat? I forgot about dinner." "I made a sandwich earlier." He nodded absently, already heading toward the stairs. "I'm beat. Don't wait up." And just like that, I was alone again. Sarah had fallen asleep against my shoulder, her breathing soft and even. I looked around the room, at the photos of family gatherings where I was always the one behind the camera, at the furniture I'd carefully chosen and maintained, at the life I'd built for everyone else. 62 years old, and sometimes I felt invisible in my own home. But tomorrow would be another day of quiet service, another day of being the backbone everyone leaned on but never thanked. I carried Sarah to her room, tucked her in, and whispered, "Sweet dreams, baby girl." She stirred, sleepily. "Love you, Grandma. You're the best. At least someone noticed. At least someone cared. For now, that had to be enough." "Happy birthday, Mom!" Emily's voice was bright as she set the cake on the dining room table. 63! Can you believe it? I could barely believe it myself. 63 years of birthdays, and this one felt different somehow. Maybe it was the way Mark kept checking his phone, or how Richard seemed more interested in the baseball game than the celebration. "Make a wish, Helen," Richard said, barely, glancing away from the TV. "Yes, Grandma. Make a good one." Sarah bounced in her chair, the only one who seemed genuinely excited. I closed my eyes and blew out the candles. What did I wish for? The same thing I'd wished for every year, to be seen, to be valued, to matter beyond the services I provided. "So what's the plan for the evening?" Jacob asked. He'd driven 2 hours to be here, paint still under his fingernails from his latest project. "Actually," Mark said, setting his phone down with obvious irritation, "we need to cut this short. My client moved our meeting to tonight." Emily's face fell. "Mark, it's my mother's birthday." "And business is business, Em. You know how important this deal is." "Can't it wait until tomorrow?" I asked quietly. Mark's expression hardened. "Helen, some of us have careers that can't be rescheduled around birthday parties. Not everyone has the luxury of doing whatever they want, whenever they want." The words stung, but I kept my voice level. "I understand work is important." "Do you?" Mark stood up, his frustration boiling over. "Because frankly, I'm tired of pretending that everyone's schedule should revolve around family dinners and birthday cakes. Some of us are trying to build something here." "Mark," Emily warned, but he was already in full stride. "I mean, let's be honest about what's happening in this family. Emily's working her ass off. I'm pulling double shifts to pay for everything. Jacob's playing artist while everyone else foots the bill, and..." He gestured at me dismissively. "Helen just sits here being dead weight." The room went silent. Even the TV seemed to quiet down. "What did you just say?" Jacob's voice was dangerous. "You heard me. Deadweight. Someone who takes up space and resources without contributing anything meaningful." Emily's face went white. "Mark, you need to apologize right now." "For what? Speaking the truth? Your mother hasn't worked in 20 years. She spends her days doing what exactly? Folding laundry, watching TV. Meanwhile, we're all breaking our backs to keep this family afloat." Sarah looked confused and scared. "Daddy, why are you yelling at Grandma?" "I'm not yelling, Princess. I'm just explaining how the real world works." I stood up slowly, my cake forgotten. The room was spinning slightly, but not from shock, from clarity. Perfect, crystalline clarity. "You're right, Mark. I said calmly. I haven't worked in 20 years. Everyone stared at me. I haven't worked because I've been too busy managing investments, handling family finances, and running this household so efficiently that none of you ever had to think about it. Mom, Emily started, but I held up my hand. But you're absolutely right about one thing. I am dead weight. Dead weight that's been carrying this family for decades. Mark's confidence faltered slightly. Helen, I didn't mean... Oh, you meant it. And you know what? It's time I started acting like it. I walked to the kitchen and began clearing the dishes. My hands weren't shaking. My voice wasn't trembling. I felt strangely calm. Helen, come back, Richard called. Mark was out of line. Was he? I called back. Or was he just saying what everyone's been thinking? Emily appeared in the doorway. Mom, he didn't mean it. He's stressed about work. Stressed enough to insult your mother on her birthday? Jacob's voice carried. From the dining room. That's your husband, Em. That's who you married. Jacob, don't make this worse. Worse? How could it get worse? He just called our mother dead weight to her face. I continued washing dishes, listening to my family implode in the next room. Mark was backtracking now, claiming he'd been misunderstood. Emily was torn between defending her husband and protecting her mother. Richard was trying to play peacemaker. Sarah was crying. But I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was done. I think everyone should go home, I said, returning to the dining room. It's been a long day. Mom, we can't leave it like this, Emily pleaded. Actually, we can. Mark has his meeting, you have your life, and I have some things to think about. Mark tried one more time. Helen, I was frustrated. I didn't mean... You meant every word, I said, looking him directly in the eyes. And you know what? Thank you. Thank you for finally saying what everyone's been thinking. It's liberating, really. He looked genuinely confused now. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. Grandma, are you okay? Sarah asked, tugging on my dress. I knelt down and kissed her forehead. I'm fine, sweetheart. Sometimes adults need to have difficult conversations. But you're not dead weight. You're the best grandma in the world. Thank you, baby. Don't you worry about any of this. After they left, the house felt different. Quieter, but not in a peaceful way. More like the quiet after a storm when you're assessing the damage. Richard found me in the kitchen an hour later. Helen. Mark was wrong to say that. Was he? Of course he was. You do plenty around here. Like what, Richard? What exactly do I do that makes me valuable? He opened his mouth, then closed it. The pause stretched too long. Exactly, I said. Dead weight. Well, at least now we all know where we stand. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. 63 years old, and my son-in-law had just reduced my entire existence to 2 words. Dead weight. But as I lay there, something unexpected happened. Instead of sadness, I felt something else entirely. Resolve. If I was dead weight, then maybe it was time to see what happened when that weight was lifted. Maybe it was time to show them all exactly what I was worth. The attic had always been my sanctuary. 3 days after my birthday disaster, I found myself climbing the narrow stairs with my morning coffee, seeking solitude and clarity. Mom, what are you doing up there? Emily's voice drifted up from below. She'd come by to apologize again, though she still hadn't convinced Mark to do the same. Just organizing some old papers, I called back. Do you need help? No, sweetheart. Take your time with Sarah. I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. I was angry, hurt, and most importantly, motivated. Mark's words had been the catalyst I'd apparently needed for years. I pulled out boxes I hadn't touched in months. Financial records, investment statements, business documents. As I sorted through them, a picture began to emerge. A picture Mark and Emily would find very interesting. "Grandma?" Sarah's voice startled me. She'd climbed up quietly, the way children do. "Hello, baby. Come sit with me." She settled beside me among the papers. "Are you hiding up here because Daddy was mean?" "I'm not hiding, sweetheart. I'm remembering." Remembering what? I held up a folder of stock certificates. Remembering who I used to be before I became just Grandma and Mom. "Who were you?" "I was smart, Sarah. Really smart. I still am, but sometimes people forget that about, older women." She picked up one of the certificates. "What's this?" "That's a piece of a company. A very successful company." "You own part of a company?" "I own part of several companies. But this one," I tapped the certificate, "is special. It started as a tiny technology firm 20 years ago. 3 young men with big dreams and no money." "What happened to them?" "They grew up. Their company grew too, and I helped them when no one else would." The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted us. Jacob's head appeared through the floor opening. "Mind if I join you? Mom said you were up here and I wanted to check on you." "Of course. Sarah and I are just reminiscing." Jacob climbed up fully and looked around at the scattered papers. "Wow, Mom. What is all this stuff?" "My past," I said simply. "My investments, my business decisions, my financial history." He picked up a statement. "Mom, this says you have stock worth. Holy shit." "Language," I said automatically. "Sorry, but Mom, do you realize what this means? You're actually wealthy." "I'm comfortable," I corrected. "I've always been comfortable. I just never felt the need to advertise it." "But why? Why keep it secret?" I looked at my son, this gentle artist, who'd struggled so hard to find his place in the world. "Because the moment people know you have money, everything changes. Every conversation becomes about what you can do for them, not who you are." "Is that why you never told us about helping Dad with the mortgage payments, or covering Emily's emergency expenses?" "You knew about that?" "I'm not blind, Mom. I see the patterns. Every time someone in this family has a crisis, somehow it gets solved. Somehow money appears. Somehow everything works out." Sarah was still examining the certificates. "Grandma, are you rich?" "I'm rich in love, sweetheart. The money is just insurance." "Insurance for what?" "For times like this. For when people decide you're not valuable anymore." Jacob sat down heavily beside me. "Mom, I'm sorry. About what Mark said. I should have defended you better." "You defended me perfectly. You were the only one who seemed genuinely outraged." "I was outraged, but I was also shocked. I mean, Emily just sat there. Dad tried to change the subject, and Mark. God, Mom. The arrogance." "He was being honest," I said. "Cruel but honest. In his mind, I contribute nothing to this family." "That's not true. Isn't it? What do I contribute, Jacob? What would happen if I simply stopped doing all the things I do?" He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Everything would fall apart." "Exactly. But they don't see it that way. To them, I'm just dead weight." Sarah looked up from the papers. What's deadweight? It's what someone calls you when they think you're not useful, I explained gently. But you're the most useful person I know. You help everyone. Thank you, baby. But helping isn't the same as being valued. Jacob was still staring at the financial documents. Mom, this company here, Tech Forward Solutions. I recognize that name. You should. They're always in the business news now. Aren't they hiring for executive positions? Big ones? I smiled. Are they? I hadn't heard. Mom. His voice was suspicious now. What aren't you telling me? Nothing important. Just that I might have a little more influence in this world than people give me credit for. How much influence? I gathered up the papers, feeling lighter than I had in years. Enough, Jacob. More than enough. Mom, you're scaring me about little. What are you planning? I'm not planning anything. I'm just adjusting my perspective. Mark thinks I'm deadweight? Fine. Let's see what happens when this deadweight starts floating instead of sinking. Sarah giggled. I don't understand, but it sounds fun. It might be, sweetheart. It just might be. As we climbed down from the attic, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. For 63 years, I'd been reactive, responsive, accommodating. I'd shaped my life around everyone else's needs and expectations. But Mark's cruel words had cracked something open inside me. Not broken. Liberated. It was time to stop being the woman who quietly held everyone together. It was time to be the woman who could tear everything apart. Linda, I need to call in a favor. I sat in my car outside the coffee shop, phone pressed to my ear, heart racing with possibility. Helen, is everything okay? You sound different. Linda Reynolds had been my friend for 15 years, ever since we'd served on the library board together. She was also the best financial advisor I'd ever known. I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. I need to ask you about Tech Forward Solutions. Your company? What about it? How much control do I actually have? A pause. Helen, you own 30% of the shares. You're essentially a silent partner with significant voting power. Why? Because I might need to be less silent. What's going on? Meet me at the usual place. I'll explain everything. An hour later, Linda and I sat across from each other in our favorite corner booth. She listened without interruption as I told her about the birthday dinner, Mark's comment, and my decision to stop being invisible. So let me get this straight, she said when I finished. Your son-in-law called you deadweight, and now you want to... What exactly? I want to remind my family who I really am, and I want to start with Mark. How? He's been bragging about some executive position he's applying for. Big company, big salary, big opportunity to prove himself. Linda's eyes widened. Please tell me he's not applying to Tech Forward. Oh, but he is. I saw the paperwork on Emily's counter yesterday. Senior Vice President of Operations. Helen, that's a board-level decision. That's your decision. I know. I smiled, feeling powerful for the first time in years. Isn't that interesting? You're going to torpedo his application? I'm going to evaluate it fairly, just like any other candidate. Linda leaned back, studying my face. You've changed. There's something different about you. I've remembered who I am underneath all the service and sacrifice. I built something, Linda. I took a risk 20 years ago when everyone told me I was crazy, and I built something significant. You did. But Helen, be careful. This kind of power can destroy families. Mark destroyed our family when he decided I was worthless. I'm just going to show him the cost of that assumption. What do you need from me? Documentation. I want every piece of paperwork that proves my stake in Tech Forward. I want it official, legal, and undeniable. Done. What else? I need to know who else is interviewing for that position. I want to understand the competition. I can get you that information. But Helen, what's your endgame here? Revenge? Justice, I corrected. There's a difference. When I got home, Richard was in the kitchen making a sandwich. How was your day? He asked absently. Productive. Very productive. Good. He wasn't really listening. Oh, Emily called. She wants to talk to you about Mark's job interview. Something about putting in a good word? I almost laughed. A good word for what? I don't know. Some company he's excited about. Tech Forward something. Tech Forward Solutions. That's it. You know them? You could say that. He looked at me then, perhaps hearing something different in my tone. Helen, is everything all right? You've been acting strange since your birthday. Have I? How so? I don't know. Distant, secretive. You spent all day yesterday up in the attic, and now you're having mysterious coffee meetings. I had coffee with Linda. Hardly mysterious. But you're up to something. I can tell. I studied my husband of 37 years. When had we stopped really talking? When had we become two people simply sharing space? Richard, what would you do if I told you I had the power to change Mark's life completely? What do you mean? I mean, what if I could decide whether he gets his dream job or not? Richard laughed. Helen, you don't work in corporate America. You don't have that kind of influence, don't I? Something in my voice must have gotten through, because he stopped laughing. Helen, what aren't you telling me? I'm telling you that your wife might be more than you think she is. I know you're more than... No, Richard, you don't. None of you do. You see the woman who makes dinner and folds laundry and quietly solves everyone's problems. But you don't see the woman who built a fortune while raising your children. His face went pale. What are you talking about? 20 years ago, when Emily was in college and Jacob was struggling in high school, I took the money from my mother's inheritance and invested it. Not in safe bonds or savings accounts, but in a risky startup run by 3 kids barely older than Emily. Helen, that startup is now worth $50 million, Richard, and I own 30% of it. He sat down heavily. That's not possible. It's not only possible, it's documented. Linda's been managing my portfolio for years. But why didn't you? Why didn't I? Because you never asked. None of you ever asked what I did with my time, my money, or my mind. You assumed I was just here, waiting to serve. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked about my interests, my thoughts, my dreams? The silence stretched between us. That's what I thought, I said gently. But it's okay, Richard. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just awake. What are you going to do? I'm going to remind everyone that dead weight can become dynamite with the right spark. Helen, please, don't do anything rash. Rash? Richard, I've spent 63 years being careful, considerate, and accommodating. Maybe it's time to be rash. That night, I called Emily. Mom, is everything okay? Everything's fine, sweetheart. I heard Mark has an interview coming up. Yes, isn't it exciting? It's exactly the kind of opportunity he's been waiting for. The salary alone would change our lives. I'm sure it would. Mom, I hate to ask, but do you know anyone at Tech Forward? Anyone who might put in a good word? I might know someone, I said carefully. Let me make some calls. Really? Oh, Mom, that would be amazing. Mark's been so stressed about this. He really needs this win. I'll do what I can, Emily. Family helps family, right? Right. Thank you so much, Mom. You're the best. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet house and smiled. Emily had no idea how much help her mother was about to provide. The question was, would it be the help she expected? Mom, I need $500. Emily's voice was tight with stress as she stood in my kitchen, Sarah clinging to her leg. For what, sweetheart? Sarah's school pictures, soccer registration, and some emergency car repairs. I'm sorry. I know I just asked for help with the apartment deposit, but you've been counting on me to solve these problems for you. I finished gently. Emily blinked. Well, I mean, you always help us out. I do. But I'm curious. What would you do if I said no? Mom, you wouldn't say no. You never say no. Maybe I should start. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah looked between us, sensing the tension. I don't understand, Emily said finally. Are you still upset about Mark's comment? Because he apologized. Did he? I must have missed that. He feels terrible about what he said. Does he? Or does he feel terrible that there were consequences? What consequences? Nothing's changed. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she become so dependent? When had I enabled this helplessness? Emily, sit down. We need to talk. I can't stay long. I have to pick up Mark from work. Why can't he drive himself? His car's in the shop. That's part of what the money's for. And before you had me to call, what would you have done? She looked genuinely confused. I don't know. Called you? That's the problem, I said quietly. You've never had to figure it out because I've always been here to solve it for you. Isn't that what mothers do? To a point, but you're 34 years old, Emily. You have a husband and a daughter. When did you last solve a problem without calling me first? She was quiet for so long that Sarah got bored and wandered into the living room. I call you because you're good at solving problems, Emily said finally. I'm good at solving problems because I've had practice. How will you get good at it if I keep taking care of everything? Mom, where is this coming from? You've never minded helping before. Haven't I? Or have you never asked if I minded? The phone rang, interrupting us. It was Jacob. Mom, I hate to bother you, but I'm in a bind. The gallery wants me to frame 12 more pieces for the showing, but I'm short on the framing costs. Could you? How much, Jacob? 800. I know it's a lot, but this could be my big break. And if I said no? A pause. I'd figure something out. Maybe ask Dad. When's the last time you asked Dad for money? Never. He doesn't have it. But I do. Well, yeah. You always seem to have it when we need it. I looked at Emily, who was listening to my side of the conversation. Jacob, I'll call you back. Mom, wait. I said I'll call you back. Ocha. After I hung up, Emily stared at me. Are you cutting us off? I'm cutting myself free. There's a difference. I don't understand the difference. The difference is that for years I've organized my entire life around everyone else's needs. I've Made myself so available, so reliable, so consistently helpful, that you've all forgotten I have needs too. What needs? You never ask for anything. Because I learned not to. Every time I had a problem, everyone was too busy with their own lives to help. So I solved it myself. Every time I had a dream, everyone was too focused on their own ambitions to care. So I pursued it alone. That's not true, isn't it? Emily, name one dream of mine that this family has supported. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Exactly, but I've supported all of yours. Your college, your wedding, your career changes, your emergencies. I've been the family bank for 30 years. We are grateful. Are you? Or are you just accustomed to it? Sarah wandered back in. Mommy, why are you crying? Emily wiped her eyes. I'm not crying, baby. But she was, and I felt a pang of guilt. This wasn't about hurting my daughter. This was about helping her grow up. Emily, I'm not abandoning you. I'm teaching you to stand on your own feet. But what if I can't? You can. You're stronger than you think. What about Mark's interview? You said you'd make some calls. I will. I'll make exactly the calls that need to be made. That evening, Richard found me on the back porch. Emily called. She's upset. I imagine she is. She said you refused to help with Sarah's school expenses. I didn't refuse. I asked her what she would do if I said no. She couldn't answer. Helen, that's not fair. She's counting on you. That's the problem, Richard. Everyone's counting on me, but no one's counting me. I don't understand. I know you don't. That's part of the problem, too. He sat down beside me. Help me understand. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. When was the last time Richard had asked me to explain anything? Mark called me Deadweight because he genuinely believes I contribute nothing to this family. Emily treats me like an ATM because she's never had to think of me as a whole person, with my own needs and limitations. Jacob loves me, but he also sees me primarily as a resource. And you. What about me? You see me as furniture, Richard. Reliable, useful, always there, never requiring maintenance. That's not true. When's the last time you asked about my day? Not whether dinner was ready or if I'd paid a bill, but what I actually did with my time. He was quiet. When's the last time you wondered if I was happy? Are you not happy? The question caught me off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked me that? I'm becoming happy, I said finally. For the first time, in years I'm becoming happy. What changed? I remembered that I have power. Real power, not just the power to serve and sacrifice, but the power to choose who deserves my service and sacrifice. That sounds ominous. It should, because things are about to change around here. Richard, starting with Mark's job interview. What about Mark's job interview? I smiled, feeling lighter and more dangerous than I had in decades. Let's just say it's going to be very educational. For all of us. The Tech Forward Solutions building was exactly what I'd expected. Sleek glass and steel, reaching toward, the sky like a monument to ambition. I'd been here before, of course, but always for quiet meetings with the executives. Today was different. Today I was here to make a statement. Mrs. Carter? The receptionist smiled politely. Mr. Davidson is ready for you in conference room A. Thank you. And please make sure the other board members know I'll be attending the interviews today. Of course. Your usual coffee? That would be lovely. I walked down the familiar hallway, passing framed articles about the company's success. 3 of them mentioned my early investment, though they referred to me as a silent partner who wished to remain anonymous. Today, the silent part was changing. Helen! James Davidson, the CEO, stood as I entered the conference room. I wasn't expecting you today. I decided to take a more active role in hiring decisions. I hope that's not a problem. Of course not. You're entitled to be here. You've never shown interest in personnel before. I've never had a personal interest before. The other board members trickled in. Teresa Walsh, our CFO, and Michael Chen, our head of operations. They greeted me warmly but with obvious curiosity. In 5 years of board meetings, I'd rarely spoken beyond asking clarifying questions. So, James said, settling into his chair, we have 3 candidates for the senior VP position, all qualified, all experienced. Should be straightforward. I'd like to review their files again, I said calmly. Teresa slid the folders across the table. I opened Mark's file first, reading through his resume with new eyes. On paper, he looked impressive. 10 years of management experience. Strong sales record. Glowing recommendations from his current employer. The first candidate is Mark Simmons, James said. He's actually here early. Very eager. I'm sure he is. 20 minutes later, Mark walked into the conference room with the confident stride I knew so well. He was wearing his best suit, the one Emily had helped him pick out for special occasions. His smile was broad and practiced. Then he saw me. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. His confident stride faltered, and for a moment he just stood there, staring. Mr. Simmons? James prompted. Please have a seat. Mark's eyes never left mine as he lowered himself into the chair across from me. His hands were trembling slightly as he set down his portfolio. Mr. Simmons, James began, thank you for coming in today. I'd like you to meet our board members. You know James Davidson, of course. This is Teresa Walsh, our CFO. Michael Chen, head of operations, and Helen Carter, one of our founding investors. Mrs. Carter, Mark managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Simmons, I replied coolly. It's nice to see you again. The other board members looked between us with interest. You two know each other? Teresa asked. Mark is married to my daughter, I said simply. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. James cleared his throat nervously. Well, that's quite a coincidence. Is it? I leaned back in my chair. Mr. Simmons, did you know about my involvement with Tech Forward when you applied for this position? Mark's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No, I had no idea. Interesting. Because according to your application, you've done extensive research on our company culture and leadership structure. I have. I researched the executive team, the public financial statements, but you didn't research the board of directors. The board members aren't. They're not usually. He was stumbling badly now. Not usually what, Mr. Simmons? Not usually relevant to day-to-day operations. Michael Chen raised an eyebrow. Mr. Simmons, the board makes all major strategic decisions for this company. How can we not be relevant? I meant that operational staff typically report to executives, not directly to board members. That's true, I said gently. But this position involves significant budget authority and strategic planning. The person we hire will be presenting directly to the board on a quarterly basis. Mark was sweating now. Of course, I understand that. Do you? Because 5 days ago, You told me that business was business, and that some people have careers that can't be rescheduled around family obligations. The room went dead silent. You also mentioned that not everyone has the luxury of doing whatever they want whenever they want, I continued. I found that comment particularly interesting. Mrs. Carter, Mark said desperately, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Has there? Because you also said that some people are dead weight, who take up space and resources without contributing anything meaningful. Teresa's eyes widened. James looked like he wanted to disappear under the table. I was having a bad day. I spoke out of turn. You spoke your truth, Mr. Simmons. Which brings me to my first question for this interview. Do you believe that people who don't work in traditional corporate environments contribute meaningfully to society? Mark's eyes darted around the room, looking for escape. Yes, of course. Many people contribute in ways that aren't measured by conventional metrics, such as volunteer work, community service, raising children, managing investments, building wealth through strategic financial decisions. Absolutely. Those are valuable contributions. I'm glad you think so, because for the past 20 years, while you assumed I was sitting at home being dead weight, I was building a portfolio worth over $15 million. The silence that followed was deafening. You see, I continued, I took my mother's inheritance, $200,000, and invested it in 3 young men who had a dream, but no backing. That investment is now worth 30% of a $50 million company. Mark looked like he was going to be sick. But here's what I find most interesting about your application, Mr. Simmons. You list family values as one of your core strengths. Could you elaborate on that? I believe that family comes first, that we should support and respect our family members. Even the ones you consider dead weight. Mrs. Carter, please. I made a mistake. I was wrong to say what I said. Were you wrong to say it, or wrong to say it in front of witnesses? Teresa leaned forward. I'm sorry, but I think we need some context here. What exactly happened? Mr. Simmons attended my 63rd birthday dinner last week, I explained, calmly. When asked to reschedule a business meeting to stay for the celebration, he became frustrated and told my family that I was dead weight who contributed nothing meaningful to society. Jesus, Michael muttered. He also suggested that everyone's schedule shouldn't revolve around family dinners and birthday cakes, since some people are trying to build something important. Mrs. Carter, James said carefully, while this is certainly uncomfortable, we try to separate personal relationships from business decisions. Of course, which is why I want to focus on the business implications of Mr. Simmons' comments. I opened my folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. Mr. Simmons, in your current position, how do you handle employees who you perceive as underperforming? I work with them to identify areas for improvement. I provide additional training and support. And if they continue to underperform, we might need to make difficult decisions about their future with the company. I see. So, you believe that people who don't meet your standards of productivity should be eliminated? That's not what I said, isn't it? You called me dead weight because you believed I wasn't productive enough to justify my existence in your orbit. Mark was gripping the arms of his chair now. Mrs. Carter, I understand you're angry. I'm not angry, Mr. Simmons. I'm curious. You see, this position requires someone who can identify and nurture underutilized assets, someone who understands that value isn't always immediately apparent. I gestured to the financial documents in front of me. For example, 20 years ago, 3 college dropouts, with a crazy idea about data processing, looked like deadweight to most investors. But I saw their potential. I invested when no one else would. Teresa was staring at the papers. "Helen, are you saying you're the anonymous early investor we've heard about?" "I am. I've been quietly supporting this company since its inception, providing capital, strategic advice, and stability during difficult periods." "My God," James breathed. "We've been trying to identify our silent partner for years. I preferred anonymity, but recent events have convinced me that it's time to be more visible." I turned back to Mark, who looked like he was having an out-of-body experience. "So, Mr. Simmons, my final question is this. If you were to discover that someone you dismissed as worthless actually held significant power over your career prospects, how would you handle that situation?" Mark's voice was barely audible. I would apologize sincerely and try to make amends." "Would you? Or would you simply be sorry you got caught underestimating them?" The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming. "I think," James said finally. "We've heard enough for now. Mr. Simmons, thank you for coming in. We'll be in touch." Mark stood on unsteady legs. "Mrs. Carter, could I speak with you privately?" "I think you've said quite enough, don't you?" He walked toward the door, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I am sorry, truly sorry." "I'm sure you are, Mr. Simmons. The question is, what are you sorry for?" After he left, the 3 other board members stared at me in stunned silence. "Well," Teresa said finally, "that was certainly the most interesting interview I've ever witnessed." "Helen," James said carefully, "I have to ask, are you planning to use your position here to settle family scores?" "Not at all," I replied. "I'm planning to use my position here to make the best decisions for the company, which is exactly what I've been doing for 20 years. And Mr. Simmons will be evaluated on his merits, just like any other candidate. The fact that he insulted me is irrelevant to his qualifications." "Is it?" Michael asked. "No," I admitted with a smile. "It's not, because a man who would call his wife's Mother Deadweight at her birthday dinner has serious judgment issues, and judgment is exactly what this position requires." As I left the building an hour later, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. The intoxicating rush of power used wisely. Mark's interview had gone exactly as I'd hoped. Not because I'd destroyed him. I hadn't needed to. He'd destroyed himself the moment he walked into that room and realized that the deadweight he'd dismissed held his future in her hands. But the real satisfaction wasn't in his humiliation. It was in the look of dawning respect in my colleagues' eyes when they realized who I really was. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible, and it felt magnificent. Emily was waiting in my driveway when I got home, her face streaked with tears and twisted with fury. "How could you?" she screamed the moment I stepped out of my car. "How could you do that to Mark?" "Do what, exactly?" "Don't play dumb, Mom. He told me about the interview, about how you humiliated him in front of the entire board." I walked toward my front door, Emily following close behind. "I attended a job interview at a company where I'm a board member. How is that humiliating him?" "You know exactly what you did. You ambushed him. You used your secret business connections to get revenge." Secret business connections? I turned to face her. Emily, I've been involved with Tech Forward for 20 years. It's not a secret. It's just something none of you bothered to ask about. Because you never told us. Because you never asked. There's a difference. We reached the front door, and I could see Richard peeking through the curtains. This conversation was about to get much bigger. Mom, please. Mark's entire career could be ruined by this. He worked so hard for that opportunity, and he threw it away when he decided to insult me at my own birthday dinner. He apologized for that. When? When did he apologize? Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. He feels terrible about what he said. Feeling terrible and apologizing are two different things, sweetheart. Richard opened the door before we could knock. What's all the shouting about? Mom sabotaged Mark's job interview. Emily burst out. She's on the board of directors at Tech Forward, and she blindsided him during his interview. Richard's face went pale. Helen, please tell me you didn't what? Didn't attend a board meeting at my own company. Didn't participate in hiring decisions that I'm legally entitled to make. Your company? Emily's voice cracked. What do you mean, your company? Sit down, I said wearily. Both of you, it's time you learned some things about your mother that you should have known years ago. We settled in the living room, Emily still crying, Richard looking shell-shocked. 20 years ago, I began. When you were in college, Emily, I inherited $200,000 from my mother. Your father thought I should put it in a safe savings account. That would have been sensible, Richard muttered. Sensible and stupid. Instead, I invested it in a startup company run by 3 college dropouts who had a crazy idea about data processing. Mom, that's impossible. You don't know anything about technology. I didn't know anything about technology, but I knew about people, and I knew about potential. Those 3 boys had something special. What boys? Richard asked. James Davidson, Teresa Walsh, and Michael Chen. They're now the CEO, CFO, and head of operations at Tech Forward Solutions. Emily's mouth fell open. The executives Mark's been trying to impress? The same ones. I've been working with them for 2 decades, helping guide company strategy and providing capital for expansion. But you're just Mom, Emily whispered. I'm Mom, who built a $15 million investment portfolio while raising your children and managing this household. Richard stood up abruptly. I need a drink. Richard, sit down. We're not finished. We're not? What are the secrets? Are you hiding, Helen? What else don't I know about my own wife? You don't know that I've been covering your gambling debts for the past 5 years. The silence that followed was deafening. What gambling debts? Emily asked. Richard's face crumpled. Helen, please don't. Don't what? Don't tell our daughter that her father has a poker problem? That he's lost over $30,000 in the past 2 years? That I've been quietly paying off his creditors to keep you from finding out? Dad? Emily's voice was small, shocked. It's not that bad, Richard said weakly. It's just recreational. Recreational gambling that requires mortgage refinancing is not recreational, Richard. It's addiction. Emily looked between us, her anger at me forgotten in the face of this new revelation. How long has this been going on? The gambling. Years. My covering for it. Also years. Why didn't you tell me? Because that's what I do, Emily. I solve problems quietly. I keep the family running smoothly. I make sure everyone else can live their lives. without worrying about the ugly details. But that's not fair to you. No, it's not. But it's what I chose to do, until Mark made it clear that my sacrifices weren't valued. Emily wiped her eyes. Mom, I had no idea about any of this. Of course you didn't, because I made sure you didn't have to know. I made sure none of you had to worry about money or mortgages or investment decisions or family crises. Richard sat back down, looking defeated. Helen, I'm sorry. About the gambling. About not appreciating what you do, about all of it. Are you sorry, Richard? Or are you scared that I might stop cleaning up your messes? He flinched. Both, I guess. The front door opened, and Jacob walked in without knocking. I heard shouting from the driveway. What's going on? Your mother is revealing all the family secrets, Richard said bitterly. What secrets? Sit down, Jacob, I said gently. You should hear this too. Jacob perched on the edge of the couch, looking wary. I've been telling your sister and father about my business interests and your father's gambling problem. What? Gambling problem? Richard, tell your son about the poker games. It's not a big deal. Richard started, but Jacob cut him off. Wait. Dad gambles? Like, seriously gambles? Seriously enough that Mom's been covering his debts, Emily said. Jacob stared at Richard. Dad, what the hell? Language, I said automatically. No, Mom. This situation calls for strong language. Dad, how could you put Mom in that position? I didn't mean for it to get out of hand. But it did get out of hand, I said. And I handled it. Just like I handled Emily's emergency car repairs, and your studio rent, and Mark's attitude problem. What attitude problem? Jacob asked. Emily and Richard exchanged glances. Mark called Mom Deadweight at her birthday dinner, Emily said quietly. He what? Jacob's voice was dangerous. It's handled, I said quickly. How is it handled? I may have influenced his job interview today. May have? I'm on the board of directors at the company where he applied. I attended his interview. Jacob started laughing, not happy laughter, the kind of laughter that borders on hysteria. So let me get this straight, he said. Mom's been secretly running a multi-million-dollar business empire while Dad's been gambling away the family savings. Emily's been treating Mom like an ATM. Mark's been calling her Deadweight. And I've been taking money for art supplies without knowing where it came from. That's a fairly accurate summary, I said. Jesus Christ, Mom. We're all terrible people. You're not terrible people. You're just selfish people. There's a difference. Is there? Terrible people hurt others intentionally. Selfish people hurt others through neglect and assumption. Which are we? That's for you to decide, Jacob. Emily was crying again. Mom, I'm so sorry. I never meant to take advantage of you. Didn't you? Emily, when's the last time you solved a problem without calling me first? I don't know. When's the last time you asked me how I was doing? I ask how you are. You ask if I'm okay. You ask if I need anything. You ask if I can help with something. But when's the last time you asked about my dreams, my interests, my happiness? She was quiet for a long time. I don't know. That's the problem. All of you. You see me as a resource, not as a person. That's going to change, Jacob said firmly. Starting now. Is it? Jacob, you called me this morning asking for $800 for framing. Did you call to ask how my day was going?" He looked stricken. "No." "None of you did, but that's okay, because I'm changing the rules now." "What does that mean?" Richard asked nervously. "It means I'm done being invisible. I'm done being taken for granted. And I'm done pretending that my feelings don't matter." "What about Mark?" Emily asked quietly. "What's going to happen with his job?" "That depends on Mark. He has 2 more interviews with other companies next week. This was just one opportunity." "But you ruined it for him." "No, Emily. Mark ruined it for himself when he decided that success meant tearing other people down instead of building himself up. He knows he was wrong." "Does he? Has he apologized? Has he acknowledged that his comment was hurtful and disrespectful?" Emily was quiet. "That's what I thought." The room fell silent again. Everyone, lost in their own thoughts and revelations. Finally, Jacob spoke up. "Mom, what happens now?" "Now we figure out how to be a family that actually sees and values each other." "And if we can't?" I looked around the room at these people I loved so much, these people who had taken me for granted for so long. "Then I guess we'll find out what happens when the foundation finally decides to stop holding up the house." 3 days later, we all sat around my dining room table like defendants awaiting sentencing. I'd called a family meeting, the first official one in our household's history. "Before anyone says anything," I began, "I want you all to understand something. This isn't about punishment. This is about truth." Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Emily had convinced him to come, though he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I've spent 63 years making everyone else's life easier," I continued. "I've solved problems, provided money, offered support, and asked for very little in return. The one thing I did ask for was respect." "Mom," Emily started, but I held up my hand. "Let me finish. Mark, 5 days ago, you made it clear that you don't respect me. You called me Deadweight in front of my family, on my birthday." Mark finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "Mrs. Carter, I owe you an apology. A real one." "Yes, you do. I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. You're not Deadweight. You're incredible. What you've built, what you've achieved while raising a family and supporting all of us, it's remarkable." "Are you apologizing because you mean it, or because you found out I have power over your career?" Mark was quiet for a long moment. "Both," he said finally. "I'm apologizing because what I said was cruel and false, but I'm also apologizing because I'm terrified of the consequences." "At least you're honest." "Mrs. Carter, is there anything I can do to make this right?" "That depends. What do you think you did wrong?" "I insulted you. I dismissed your contributions to this family." "What else?" Mark looked confused. I don't know what else." "You reduced me to my utility value. You judged my worth based solely on what I could do for you, rather than who I am as a person." "You're right. And I don't know what you want me to say." "I want you to understand that respect isn't conditional on usefulness. I want you to understand that your wife's mother deserves basic human dignity, regardless of whether she can advance your career." Mark nodded, but I could see he didn't fully grasp the concept yet. "Richard," I turned to my husband. "Your turn. Helen, I know I failed you. The gambling, the neglect, the taking you for granted, all of it." "Tell me about the gambling." His face reddened. "It started small. Just friendly games with guys from work. But it escalated." "How much Have you lost? Total. Over the past 5 years? Maybe 40,000. Emily gasped. Jacob swore under his breath. Where did you think that money was coming from, Richard? I told myself it was coming from your inheritance, from your mother's money. My mother left me $200,000. Did you think it was infinite? I didn't think. That's the problem. I assumed you had it handled. Like you assumed I had everything else handled. Yes. Richard, do you want to stay married to me? The question hung in the air like a sword. Of course I do. Why? Because I love you. Do you? Or do you love what I do for you? I love you, Helen. The real you. Who is the real me, Richard? Describe me without mentioning anything I do for this family. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched uncomfortably. You can't, can you? You're kind, he said finally. You're intelligent. You're stronger than anyone gives you credit for. What are my hobbies? You read? What do I read? Books. What kind of books, Richard? Another long pause. I don't know. What's my favorite color? Blue. It's green. It's been green for 37 years. Helen, what's my biggest fear? I don't know. What's my greatest dream? I don't know. Richard, you've been married to me for 37 years, and you don't know my favorite color, my hobbies, my fears, or my dreams. He was crying now, which was something I hadn't seen in years. Emily, I said gently, what about you? Mom, I know I've been selfish. I know I've taken advantage of your generosity. What's my favorite book? Emily bit her lip. I don't know. What do I do when you're all busy with your own lives? I don't know. When did I last go out with friends? You went out with Linda this week. Before that? I don't know. Jacob, you're the only one who hasn't spoken yet. My youngest son looked around the table, then back at me. Mom, I don't know your favorite book or your hobbies either, but I know you cry sometimes when you think no one's looking. The table went quiet. I know you stand at the kitchen window watching birds in the morning. I know you keep a journal that you write in when you're upset. I know you donate money to animal shelters, but you never tell anyone. I felt tears welling up. How do you know these things? Because I pay attention to you, not just to what you can do for me. Jacob, but I also know I've been taking advantage of you. The money for art supplies, the studio rent, all of it. I never asked if you could afford it. I just assumed you could. Can you afford it, Mom? Emily asked quietly. Yes, but that's not the point. What is the point? The point is that none of you ever asked. None of you ever considered that I might have limits, needs, feelings about how my money was being used. Mark spoke up. Mrs. Carter, how do we fix this? You start by seeing me as a complete person instead of a collection of services. How do we do that? You ask me how I'm feeling instead of what I can do for you. You consider my needs. When making plans that affect me, you include me in conversations instead of talking around me. Is it too late? Richard asked. Have we damaged this family beyond repair? I looked around the table at these people who had shaped my entire adult life. They were flawed, selfish, sometimes cruel people. But they were also my people. I don't know, I said honestly. That depends on whether you're willing to change how you see me and treat me. What if we can't change enough? Emily asked. Then I'll have to decide whether I want to spend my remaining years being invisible in my own family. And if you decide you don't, then I'll build a new life where I'm valued for who I am, not just what I can provide. Would you really leave us? Emily's voice was small, scared. Emily, I've been leaving you for years, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I've been disappearing piece by piece every time one of you treated me like furniture. But would you physically leave? I honestly don't know. Ask me in 6 months, after we see whether any of you can learn to love the person I actually am. The room fell silent again, everyone absorbing the weight of what I'd said. Finally, Sarah's voice carried in from the living room, where she'd been watching cartoons. Grandma, can you help me with my puzzle? I looked around the table at my family, broken, flawed, but still mine. In a minute, sweetheart. I called back. The grown-ups are learning how to be better people. That sounds hard, Sarah replied. It is, baby. But some things are worth the work. I turned back to my family. The question is, do you think I'm worth the work? One by one, they nodded. But I'd learned the difference between nodding and doing. Time would tell which one they meant. 2 months later, I stood in the tech-forward boardroom again. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. Mark sat across from me. Not as a supplicant seeking employment, but as our newest junior executive. The quarterly reports look good, James was saying. Mark, how are you settling in? Very well, thank you. Mrs. Carter has been incredibly helpful in getting me oriented. I smiled. After weeks of family therapy and difficult conversations, Mark had taken a different position at Tech Forward. Not the senior VP role he'd originally wanted, but a mid-level management position that would let him prove himself. Helen suggested we start you in operations management, Teresa added. She thought it would give you better insight into our company culture. Mark nodded. She was right. I'm learning a lot about how leadership actually works. After the meeting, Mark and I walked to the parking garage together. Mrs. Carter, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you give me a chance? After what I said, after how I treated you? Why didn't you just let me fail? I considered. The question. Because destroying you wouldn't have helped my daughter or my granddaughter, and because everyone deserves an opportunity to grow. But you could have ruined my career. Mark, I could ruin your career today if I wanted to. But I don't want power over you. I want respect from you. You have it. Completely. Do I? Or do I have fear? He was quiet for a moment. Both, I think. But the respect is real. Working with you these past 2 months, seeing how you think, how you make decisions. I understand now why James and Teresa defer to your judgment. Good, because respect based on understanding is much more valuable than respect based on fear. Mrs. Carter? Yes? Emily told me about the family changes, the new rules you've established. I nodded. We'd instituted several changes after our family meeting. Everyone now contributed to household expenses based on their income. Family decisions were made collectively, with my input valued equally, and everyone was required to ask about my day before asking for favors. How do you feel about them? Honestly, it's strange. I spent 30 years being the one everyone turned to for everything. Now Emily's handling her own car repairs. Jacob's managing his own finances. And your father is in counseling. Are you happy about it? I'm learning to be happy about it. It's harder than I expected, watching everyone struggle with things I used to handle for them. But necessary. But necessary. We reached our cars. Mrs. Carter, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but are you planning to stay married to Mr. Carter? The question surprised me. Why do you ask? Because Emily's worried. She says he's really struggling with the changes. Richard was struggling. The gambling counseling was difficult. And learning to see me as an equal partner. After 37, years of marriage was harder than either of us had anticipated. Marriage is complicated, Mark. Especially marriages that need to be rebuilt from the ground up. Do you think it's worth rebuilding? I don't know yet, but I know it's worth trying. That evening, I found Richard in the kitchen making dinner. This was new, part of our renegotiated division of labor. How was your day? He asked, and I could tell he was making a conscious effort to ask. Productive. How was counseling? Hard. Dr. Martinez thinks I've been using gambling as a way to avoid dealing with my feelings about our marriage. What feelings? That I was afraid you were too good for me. That I didn't deserve someone as capable and intelligent as you. I set down my purse and really looked at my husband. So you gambled. So I retreated. Into the garage, into poker games. Into anything that didn't require me to acknowledge how much better you were at everything than I was. Richard, I was never trying to be better than you. I know that now, but for years I felt like I was married to someone who could do anything, while I could barely keep up. Why didn't you tell me? Because then you'd know how inadequate I felt, and you might leave. So instead you gambled away $40,000 and emotionally abandoned our marriage? Yes, which was stupid and selfish and nearly cost me the best thing in my life. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table. Richard, do you want to know what my biggest fear has been for the past 20 years? Tell me, that all of you would figure out you didn't actually need me, and I'd end up alone. That's impossible. Is it? I made myself so indispensable that I forgot to make myself lovable. Helen, you are lovable. Am I? Or am I just useful? Richard turned off the stove and sat across from me. Dr. Martinez asked me to describe you without mentioning anything you do for me or the family. What did you say? I couldn't do it at first, but then I started thinking about who you were when we first met. Who was I? You were fearless. You had opinions about everything and weren't afraid to share them. You laughed at inappropriate jokes and cried at movies and had these big dreams about traveling the world. I'd forgotten about the travel dreams. You wanted to see Ireland and Japan and the Northern Lights. You remember that? I remember everything about who you used to be. I just lost track of who you became. I became who I thought you needed me to be. But I needed who you were, not who you thought I wanted. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in thought. Richard? Yes? If we're going to make this work, really work, you need to understand something. What? I'm not going back to being invisible. I'm not going back to managing everyone's life while neglecting my own. I don't want you to. Even if it means I'm sometimes unavailable when you need me. Even if it means I make decisions that inconvenience you. Even then. And the gambling is over, completely. Dr. Martinez is helping me find healthier ways to deal with stress and inadequacy. Good. Helen? Yes? What's your favorite book? I smiled. Pride and Prejudice. I reread it every year. What's your biggest dream right now? To see the Northern Lights, and to feel like my family actually knows who I am. We're "Working on both," he said. "I promise." Later that evening, Sarah called to say goodnight. 6 months after that first family meeting, I stood in my kitchen on a Saturday morning, watching Richard make pancakes, while Sarah helped by stirring the batter. The scene was so ordinary, yet so different from anything we'd shared in years. "Grandma, Dad says you used to want to see the northern lights," Sarah said, chocolate chips somehow finding their way into her hair despite her careful stirring. "I still do, sweetheart." "Can we go together someday?" Before I could answer, Richard turned from the stove. "Actually, Sarah, I have a surprise for your grandmother." He pulled out an envelope from the kitchen drawer. "Helen, I booked us a trip to Iceland, 2 weeks in November during Aurora season." I stared at the envelope, speechless. "Richard, I know I have 37 years of not paying attention to make up for. I figure I should start with the northern lights." Tears welled up in my eyes. The good kind. The kind I'd almost forgotten how to cry. Emily walked in then, coffee mug in hand, no longer the frazzled woman who used to rush in demanding solutions to problems she could solve herself. "Morning, Mom. How did you sleep?" "Well, thank you. How's the new apartment?" Emily and Mark had moved out 3 months ago. Not in anger, but because they'd realized they needed to build their own life together. Sarah spent weekends with us, and the time apart had made our relationship stronger, not weaker. "Great. Mark's actually cooking dinner tonight. Who would have thought?" "How's he doing at work?" Emily smiled. A real smile, not the tight one she used to wear when discussing her husband. "He's thriving in operations management. Says he's learning more about leadership in 6 months with you than he did in 5 years climbing the corporate ladder elsewhere." "Good leaders are made, not born," I said. "And everyone deserves a chance to learn." Jacob wandered in, paint still under his fingernails from his morning art session. He'd moved into the studio apartment above the garage. Close. Enough to help when needed. Far enough to maintain his independence. "Mom, I sold another painting yesterday." "Jacob, that's wonderful." "The gallery owner said my work has more depth now. More emotional complexity." He poured himself coffee and sat down. "I think it's because I'm finally paying attention to the people around me instead of just expecting them to pay attention to me. These moments, these ordinary Saturday morning conversations, were what I'd been fighting for, without even realizing it. Not grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but simple recognition of my place in this family, as a person, not just a provider." Mark arrived to pick up Sarah, and I watched him interact with Richard and Jacob. The tension that used to fill the room whenever he appeared had been replaced by something I never thought I'd see. Mutual respect. "Mrs. Carter," he said as Sarah gathered her things, "I wanted to let you know. I'm putting together a presentation for the board about implementing mentorship programs for young employees. Would you be willing to review it?" "Of course. But Mark..." "Yes? You can call me Helen now. We're family." He smiled. Not the calculating smile I'd grown used to, but something genuine. "Thank you, Helen." After they left, I found myself alone with my thoughts for the first time in weeks. I walked out to the garden, where the roses I'd planted 20 years ago were blooming despite the fact that no one had asked me to plant them. No one had thanked me for tending them, and no one had even noticed them until recently. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "How are you feeling about everything?" I thought about her question. How was I feeling? Different. Lighter. Like I'd been holding my breath for decades and could finally exhale. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been tears, arguments, and moments when I wondered if it would have been simpler to just go back to being invisible. But invisibility, I'd learned, wasn't peace. It was just a different kind of prison. Richard found me in the garden an hour later. "Penny for your thoughts?" "I was thinking about the roses," I said. "I planted them because I loved them, not because anyone asked me to." Somewhere along the way, I forgot I was allowed to do things just because they brought me joy. What brings you joy now? I considered the question. Watching Sarah discover the world, seeing Jacob's confidence grow, knowing that Emily and Mark are building something real together, even watching you make pancakes on Saturday mornings. What about your own dreams? The travel, the books you want to write, the life you put on hold? I'm not putting anything on hold anymore. I'm 63 years old, Richard. If I don't live my own life now, when will I? He took my hand. Another small miracle in our slowly rebuilding marriage. "Helen, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm proud of you. Not for what you do for us, but for who you are, for your strength, your intelligence, your capacity to forgive people who didn't deserve it." We all deserved forgiveness, Richard. We just needed to earn it. That evening, I sat in my study, a room I'd claimed for myself after years of using the kitchen table as my desk, working on something I'd never had time for before, my own projects. I was writing, not grocery lists or family schedules, but stories, memories, thoughts that were mine alone. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet, a peaceful quiet. Richard was reading in the living room, classical music playing softly in the background. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. My phone rang. It was Emily. "Mom, I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on us. For fighting for yourself instead of just accepting how we treated you." "Emily, no, let me finish. I was talking to Mark about it, tonight. We realized that we were teaching Sarah that it was okay to take people for granted if they loved you enough to let you." "What kind of lesson is that?" "What did you tell her?" "That love doesn't mean disappearing for other people. That the people who care about us deserve our attention and respect, not just our problems." After I hung up, I realized something profound. I hadn't just saved myself. I'd saved my family from becoming people who would have regretted their choices too late to fix them. The next morning, I woke up early and made myself coffee. Just one cup, just for me. I sat on the back porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Contentment. Not happiness dependent on others' approval or appreciation, but deep, quiet satisfaction with who I was and what I'd built. Not just for my family, but for myself. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Grandma, I drew you another picture. This time you're not a superhero. You're just you, and that's even better." I smiled, saving the message to read again later. At 63, I'd finally learned the most important lesson of my life. Being valued starts with valuing yourself. Being seen starts with refusing to be invisible. Being loved starts with believing you're worthy of love. Not for what you can do, but for who you are. The roses in my garden bloomed not because anyone asked them to, but because that's what roses do. They bloom because it's their nature. I was finally ready to bloom too. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, remember this. You don't need permission to take up space. You don't need to earn your right to be seen, heard, and valued. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to disappear. Your story matters. Your voice matters. You matter. And if the people around You can't see that. Maybe it's time to help them learn, or find people who already know.